If you're a busy man over 40 balancing work, family, and other responsibilities, you probably don't have time for conventional workout programs that have you in the gym 6 days a week. But thankfully, there's a better approach that won't take up nearly as much time. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rio and I specialize in helping busy men over 40 transform their bodies with minimal time investment. Over the last 7 years, I've transformed my physique from this to this, and I've helped many other men achieve the same transformation using my minimalist training approach. In this video, I'm gonna show you step by step how you can build muscle by working out twice a week with minimalist training. We're gonna cover 5 things in this video: the key principles of minimalist training so that we set a strong foundation, what exercises to do, how much and how heavy to lift, the best 2-day workout split, and then some extra tips to cut down your training time. So let's start off by talking about the 4 principles of minimalist training. So the first principle is low volume, high intensity. And so what does that even mean? Well, with minimalist training, you reduce the total amount of volume that you do in each individual workout, and you focus on training more intensely in that reduced amount of volume, right? So with a lot of conventional bodybuilding routines, they do the opposite, right? They do a lower intensity approach, but they do a lot more volume, right? They do a lot more exercises, a lot more sets. But with minimalist training, with low volume, high intensity training, you're reducing how much volume you do. You're doing fewer exercises and fewer sets in each workout, but you're training a lot more intensely on those fewer sets and fewer exercises. And what does training intensity even mean? Well, training intensity means pushing your sets close to failure. And what training close to failure means is taking your sets to where you can no longer move the weight despite exerting maximal effort, right? It's on that last rep where you just you can't get it up, right? That's what training to failure means. When I first got into weight training, I followed a more bodybuilding style of training, right? For the first year, I did lower intensity training and I did a lot more volume, right? And so I was in the gym 5-6 days a week, following the status quo of doing like 10 to 20 sets per muscle group, a lot of isolation exercises, a lot of exercises per workout. And I reached this point where I was realizing like the ROI wasn't there, right? There was no return on investment. I was putting a lot of time into the gym. I was really dedicating myself to it, but I wasn't getting very much results in return. And so I didn't even know at the time that low volume, high intensity training would be more effective. I just saw from a lifestyle standpoint that I was putting in a lot of time and effort and not getting much in return. So I slowly started reducing how much time I spent in the gym. So I went from training 5 to 6 days a week down to just 2 to 3. And in those individual workouts, I did fewer exercises and fewer sets. And that is when my progress really took off. And I had this huge epiphany that when I was spending a lot of time in the gym, I was basically just going through the motions, right? And so Arthur Jones, who is known as like a pioneer of high intensity training, he had this really famous quote that I say in like every single video, which is, you can either train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so what I was realizing was that I was training long, but as a result of training long, I wasn't able to train hard. And that's when I really learned about this trade-off between volume, the amount of exercises and sets you do in each workout, and intensity, which is how hard you train. And so if you're gonna do a lot of volume, you cannot train as hard. If you do less volume, you can train much harder. And you might be wondering like, why is that important? Well, what I learned is that training hard is what actually counts. And so even though I was doing a lot less volume in each workout, since I was able to now train much harder, I started actually being able to build muscle. Because what most people don't understand is that how much time you spend in the gym, how much volume you do, is relatively insignificant and irrelevant compared to how hard you can train. And in order to train hard, you have to do less. Because really, it's the last few reps on each set that actually stimulate muscle growth and count. And so if you're leaving those reps in the tank on account of doing more total sets and more total volume, then it's actually not beneficial, and you'd actually be better off reducing how much volume you do and putting more intensity into your training. If you're a busy man over 40 struggling to find time for the gym, I created a free minimalist muscle building masterclass for you that outlines my entire step-by-step system that will allow you to build the body you want working out just twice a week on minimalist workout routines. And so if you want to pick that up, you can pick it up completely free by clicking the first link in my description. So the next principle is progressive overload. And so by following a low volume, high intensity approach and really focusing on pushing your sets hard and making them count, you're going to be creating tension in your muscles. And tension is the primary driver of muscle growth, right? However, tension is not enough to keep muscle growth coming. It's good for stimulating muscle growth, but the thing is that our bodies are adaptation machines, right? And so your body is going to quickly adapt to the tension that you're subjecting to it right now. And in order to continue gaining muscle, you need to continue increasing the levels of tension that you place on your muscles. And the best way to do that is by adding weight and or reps to the bar over time. And so progressive overload is by far the most important training principle. And I would say people's lack of understanding that is really the reason why most people spin their wheels continuously, right? Because the thing is, if we go back fundamentally to how a body is built, like you're tearing it down and then you're giving it time to recover and build up bigger and stronger, right? However, you need to give your body a reason to grow. And that reason is to continue increasing the loads that you subject your body to over time, right? You need to continue subjecting it to more and more tension, and that's how you're going to force your body to continuously grow. And most people, they walk into the gym without a plan, right? They don't track their workouts, they don't have a strength progression system in place, they do a different rotation of exercises every single week, and they don't really, like, their lack of having a plan prevents them from like systematically increasing how much weight they lift over time. And that's really the most important principle of weight training. And so how I like to progress my workouts, because obviously you need a system in place to help you make progress, right? You don't want to just like pick weights by, like random selection based on how you're feeling. You need to have a system in place to guide that progress, right? And so what I like doing is called the double progression method. And so the double progression method is where you essentially work in rep ranges on your sets, right? Maybe it's 4 to 6, maybe it's 6 to 8, maybe it's 6 to 10. You work within a rep range and you use a given weight, right? So let's say you're doing 6 to 8 reps for 2 sets on the bench press and you're using 200 pounds, right? So on the first workout, you try and get 6 reps with the 200 pounds. And then in the next workout, you would try and add a rep and get 7, right? And then in the workout after that, you try and get 8. Now, this doesn't always happen so linearly. Obviously, like, it takes time to build strength. However, following that system basically will tell you when it's time to add weight. And so when you hit 8 reps, you hit the top end of the rep range. And then in the following workout, you'll then add a little bit of weight, usually like 5 pounds, and then you'll drop to the bottom of the rep range again, right? Because unless you're a pure beginner weightlifter, it's gonna be really difficult to just like stick with a certain rep target and just add 5 pounds per week. It's much better to work within a rep range, focus on progressing with reps, and then when you hit the top end of the rep range, add a little bit of weight and then drop the reps, right? And so that's my favorite way to progress. You can also use something like micro loading, although that's a little bit inaccessible for a lot of people, but a lot of times, especially on certain movements like upper body movements, it's more in line with the rate at which you can progress, right? So instead of adding 5 pounds, you use micro plates and you go up in small increments, right? Whether that's 1 pound or 2 pounds per week, and that's also a really effective progression style. The next principle is low frequency. And so at the beginning, we talked about low volume, high intensity. And so that speaks to the individual workouts, right? That means doing fewer sets, fewer exercises in each workout, but pushing that reduced amount of training volume much harder. But the frequency speaks to how often you work out. And so you want to follow a low frequency training approach and give yourself plenty of recovery days between your workouts. So the truth is, most people weight train way too frequently and don't give their bodies enough time to grow bigger and stronger, right? And so the fundamental thing to understand here that most people don't is that muscle is not built in the gym. Muscle is built outside of the gym when you're resting and you're recovering, right? And so if you want to gain muscle at the fastest rate possible, it is my belief that you want more rest days than training days each week. Most people, if you go to the public gym, are constantly spinning their wheels. They're lifting the same weights month after month. They look the same month after month, despite spending hours upon hours in the gym every week. And so that should tell you that how much time you spend in the gym, how often you work out, doesn't really matter, right? Because generally speaking, if you are someone who is not taking performance enhancing drugs, you have a reduced recovery ability, right? And so you have to give yourself plenty of recovery time between workouts in order to achieve consistent progress. And so what most people don't understand is that a lot of the conventional workout programs out there are built by steroid users, right? They're built by people who have enhancement. And if you didn't know, what steroids do is they give you superhuman recovery abilities. They allow you to recover fast and easy from very high volumes of training, and they allow you to train very frequently, right? But that's not a luxury that you have as someone who is not taking drugs and who has a life outside of the gym, right? Your work, your family responsibilities, like any other responsibility, that's all shit that is digging into your recovery ability. And that's not even like addressing the fact that you're not taking steroids, right? And so if you add all that up, you realize that like less is more for most people, right? And so you don't need to be training 4 to 6 days a week to build a great physique. In fact, most people will remain stagnant with that approach. And so what is the magic of training less? Obviously, you get more recovery between workouts, right? But what does having more recovery do? Well, as I said, it allows you to gain muscle faster since you're actually giving your body the rest time it needs to fucking grow, right? But that also has a knock-on effect to the quality of your workouts. And so what happens is that you start to go into your workouts really fresh, really recovered. And what that does is that allows you to train much harder. And so if you remember from before, training hard is what counts, right? And so a lot of people, since they work out so frequently, they go into their workouts still fatigued from the last workout, and that prevents them from being able to actually train hard in their workouts. And so by training less often, you step into your workouts fully fresh, fully recovered. That allows you to train much harder in the work that you do, right? And the other thing to understand is that you start to achieve consistent progressive overload. And so as I said, progressive overload is really the most important training principle. And so as a result of people not giving their bodies enough time to recover between workouts and going into their workouts fatigued, they struggle to add weight to their exercises over time. Go to your public gym, look around, most people lift the same weights month to month. That's because they don't give their bodies time to recover from their workouts. And so if you go into your workouts really fresh and really recovered, you're gonna have a lot more success at continuously progressively overloading your exercises. Whereas if you're training too frequently, not giving your body enough recovery time, it's gonna be really hard to add weight over time. What you have to understand is that weight training is not about going to the gym as many days as possible. It's about stringing together many consecutive progressive workouts over time. The final principle is to focus on compound exercises. Compound exercises are movements that work many joints and muscle groups. So some good examples include squats, bench presses, deadlifts, overhead presses, weighted chin-ups, rows, and dips. And there are 3 reasons why you want to focus on compound movements. They work the most muscle mass in your body, you can load them the heaviest, and they're the easiest to progressively overload. And I'm not saying isolation exercises aren't effective. They're very effective and they should be a part of your workout program, but the main point is that you want to place most of your focus on the compound movements, not only because they're the most effective, but if you're someone who really cares about maximizing your gym efficiency, then they're just the most bang for your buck movements, right? And so put it this way, if you were to focus almost exclusively on isolation exercises like most people do, you would need dozens of isolation exercises in order to work your entire physique, right? Because isolation exercises, they work a single joint and muscle group. So you need a lot of them in order to cover your entire body. Whereas with compound movements, you can focus on just a good handful and they will cover your entire body, right? And so that is where you want to place most of your focus, not only because they're the most effective, but they're the most efficient. It's going to save you a lot of time in the gym. So we covered why you should focus mostly on compound exercises, but the question is, what exercises specifically should you do? Well, when I first got into training and I first started doing lots of research, I stumbled across this guy named Stuart McRobert, and he has been my biggest training mentor. And he had a quote where he said, "The key to building a great physique is really simple. You have to have a handful of big compound exercises that you focus on mastering, you focus on getting as strong as possible at over time," right? And I have found that to be 100% true for myself. That is really the key to building a good physique. Everyone makes it very complicated, but essentially you need a handful of lifts that work well for you, that work a lot of muscle in your body, and you just need to get really strong at them over time. That's really all it comes down to. The quality of your body in terms of your muscle mass, your body composition will pretty much be in direct proportion to how strong you get at those movements that you focus on, right? And so I covered some good examples of really good compound exercises, right? With squats, bench presses, deadlifts, overhead presses, weighted chin-ups, rows, and dips. Those are what I believe to be the best exercises. However, you don't need to do the conventional variations of those movements. And so when I'm working with clients, I basically have 2 criteria that I give them. First of all, I say, obviously you need to do compound exercises to begin with, because you'd be so surprised at how many people don't fucking train them at all. But then the next criteria is that you need to hit on all the main movement patterns, right? And so what are the main movement patterns? Well, you need some sort of squat, right? And then you need a hip hinge, which is a deadlift of some kind. And then you need a vertical push, which is an overhead press of some kind. And then you need a vertical pull, which is a weighted chin up or pull up. And then you need a horizontal push, which is a chest press of some kind. And then you need a horizontal pull. So the exercises that you choose for those main movement patterns are going to make up your core 5 to 6 exercises, right? Those are going to be the most important exercises that you really want to focus on and get really, really strong at over time, right? And then beyond that, you want to select some isolation exercises for weak points. And so a common question I get asked is like, how do you know what isolation exercises to pick? It's very simple. You just pick the isolation exercises based on your weak points, right? So maybe your biceps leg behind, right? Maybe your triceps leg behind, maybe your neck legs behind. All you want to do is just select some isolation exercises to bring up those weak points and make sure that you have a balanced physique, right? So isolation exercises are great, and they serve a very important purpose in any workout program. They help you develop a more balanced physique, right? Because a lot of times if you just focus on the compound movements, you will develop, weaknesses in terms of the smaller muscle groups. However, where most people go wrong is that they place too much focus on isolation exercises to where it detracts from their recovery ability, it detracts from what they can put into the compound movements, which are really the bread and butter, right? Because people think they can just endlessly add shit to their workout program, but they don't realize like you have a limited recovery ability, and by doing too many isolation exercises, you're basically chipping away at their recovery ability. You're stopping yourself from putting the focus, energy, and reserves into what really matters most, which is the compound movements. So now let's talk about how much and how heavy to train. And so a lot of people obsess over sets per muscle group. A lot of people say you need 10 to 20 sets per muscle group. It's absolutely bullshit. If you push your sets really intensely, you need very little volume. And so always remember, the harder you train, the less training you need to build muscle. You can a lot of times replace volume with more intensity. And that is something that you want to take full advantage of as someone who wants to be very efficient with your gym time. And so when it comes to sets per muscle group, what I've seen from my own experience and what I've seen working with clients is that the sweet spot tends to be between 2 to 6 sets per muscle group. And so you're gonna be somewhere in that range, and where you are in that range really depends on the other factors of your lifestyle, right? How good is your recovery? Do you have a really stressful job? Are you older? Are you younger? Those different things are going to play significant roles in how much volume you can handle. But the key thing to always remember is that, you don't want to do as much volume as possible, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to stimulate muscle growth with a small quantity of training so that you can then get out of the gym, rest, recover, and then come back a little bit bigger and stronger. It's not about annihilation, right? I have a moniker that I always tell my clients: stimulate, don't annihilate. And the reality is that you need very little volume in order to stimulate muscle growth. And so what should the rep range look like, right? Well, the muscle growth rep range is between 5 and 30 reps. And so a lot of people obsess over, are high reps better or low reps better? The truth is, they will build just as much muscle, right? There are some other factors to consider though. If you're older, you might benefit from doing a little bit higher reps, right? Because lifting very heavy in low rep ranges tends to be much more strenuous on your joints and tendons. And so for my over 40 clients, I a lot of times have them work in sort of an 8 to 15 rep range a lot of times. However, the thing is with high rep training is that it tends to be very grueling. And if you enjoy lifting heavy, you might enjoy, working in lower rep ranges, right? But the key thing to understand is that any rep number between 5 and 30 will stimulate muscle growth as long as the sets are taken close to failure. That is all that matters, right? And so as long as you're in the 5 to 30 rep range, you can choose whatever your rep scheme, like you can choose it based upon your personal preferences, right? Don't worry too much about like, oh, will low reps build more muscle? Will high reps build more muscle? They'll build the same amount of muscle as long as the sets are challenging, you take them close to failure, and you focus on progressively overloading them over time. And you might be wondering as well, like how many exercises should I do per muscle? In the bodybuilding world, they'll have you do like 4 to 6 exercises per muscle to hit it from all different angles. But what I've seen is that is a complete dilution of focus. So what I like to do is I like to do just 1 to 2 exercises per muscle group. And again, doing too much is gonna dilute your recovery. It's gonna dilute your focus. And so if you're trying to do like 4 to 6 different exercises, that's like your adaptational reserves, your resources are having to be allocated to all those different movements, right? Whereas if you take that same focus, you take those same resources and you apply it to fewer exercises, you can a lot of times make much more significant progress in those movements, right? And remember, progress is what counts. It's not about how much you do, right? And so I've always found that by doing fewer exercises, fewer sets, I've made much more significant strength gains, and those strength gains have almost always just equated to more muscle mass on my frame. So now let's get into the workout split. And so this is everybody's favorite topic. Everybody obsesses over the workout splits. The reality, guys, is that so many different workout splits have the potential to be productive, right? You really want to focus on the core principles that I talked about at the beginning of the video in terms of following a low volume, high intensity training approach, focusing on progressive overload, focusing on a low frequency training approach where you give yourself lots of recovery days, and focusing on compound movements. That's the reason I started the video with those principles, is because as long as you have those principles in place, everything else doesn't really matter that much, right? And so this is like, I'm not throwing shade at anyone here, but the core sign of a noob is someone who really obsesses over the workout split. Like, people who obsess over the workout split, I'm like, oh dude, like you don't understand. This guy doesn't know. This guy doesn't get it. But my favorite way, just because I love giving people guidance, like do this, right? The best workout split that I've personally found for myself is full body twice a week with 2 different sets of exercises. And so I'll give you the skeleton of this full body twice a week structure, so that you have the flexibility to sort of morph it for yourself to your personal needs and preferences, right? So the way I like to do it is that we talked about the core movements, right? And so that's why I talked about that first, because once you have the core exercises you're gonna focus on, that hit on like the big compound movements that hit on all the main movement patterns, then you're in a good position to create your workout split, right? And so what I like to do is I like to take those movement patterns and then I split that up into 2 different workouts. So on Monday, my workout A, I like to do a squat with a vertical push and a vertical pull, and then 2 to 3 isolation exercises. And then on the workout B, which I'll typically do on Thursday or Friday, I like to do a hip hinge, which is a deadlift, and then a horizontal push and a horizontal pull. And then again, 2 to 3 isolation exercises of my choice. And so that is basically the structure that you want to follow. It's extremely simple, but it's also extremely effective, right? And for each of those movements, I like to do 2 to 3 sets. And that's pretty much the extent of it. If you follow a simple structure like that and you have those core principles in place, you're gonna make incredible progress. The only thing I'd say is that if you're brand new to training, what I would do is I would do full body twice a week with the same set of exercises in each routine. And the reason being is because when you're new to training, you need to practice your exercises more often, right? You're not neuromuscularly efficient in the movements that you're doing. And what that basically means is that you don't know how to use your muscles yet. Like your central nervous system doesn't know how to recruit your muscles to produce force, right? And so the way to combat that is to train the exercises more often. And you're also in a unique position when you're brand new to training because you're not lifting heavy enough weights yet for that, 2 times per week hit to really impact your recovery significantly, right? So if you're someone who's squatting 400 pounds for reps, you're probably not gonna be able to fucking do that twice a week, right? However, if you're squatting like 100 pounds, doing that twice a week is really not going to make that much of a difference, and you'll really benefit from that extra practice of doing the exercises twice a week, because what that will do is that will allow you to basically condense your progress into half the time, right? Because you'll be able to have 2 opportunities to make progress each week. And that extra practice will also help you learn how to do the movements and then use your muscles on those movements, right? Because remember what I said, the key is to really get as strong as possible at the movements that you're doing. It's to master them, right? That's what's going to equate to a great physique. And so the key to doing that at the beginning is to really prioritize nailing the movements, learning proper form, and practicing them more often. All of the strategies that we've outlined so far are designed to help you make the same rate of progress, if not better progress, while spending significantly less time in the gym. However, with a few tactics that I'm about to give you, you can cut your training time down even more while still making the same rate of progress. And so the first tactic I've used is supersets. And so supersets are where you hit one set of an exercise and then immediately follow that up with a set of a different exercise. And so the key to making supersets work is to make sure that the exercises you're supersetting do not overlap in the muscles that they use. And so for example, going from doing a row supersetting that with a bicep curl is not a great idea because the biceps are going to be used in both movements and your performance is going to be affected as a result. However, if you're doing bicep curls and then you follow that up with neck curls, that's going to work perfectly because the muscles used do not overlap, right? And so I love doing this at the end of my workout with the isolation exercises, just because, they're already small movements, and a lot of times the isolation exercises you're using are going to be using different muscles. However, with compound exercises, it's a little bit more tricky because of how taxing they are, and because they're basically all full body movements, right? And so supersetting two different exercises together, while they might not work the same direct muscle, there's still going to be, a systemic effect that has taken place as a result of how taxing the movements are. And so for that reason, I'm not a huge fan of supersetting compound movements. However, if you want to try that out, you 100% can. So some good examples might be supersetting bench press and rows, right? Like a push and then a pull, because they use opposing muscle groups, right? Maybe you go from doing squats to weighted chin-ups, right? You can definitely test that out. If that works for you, then that's also a very effective strategy for cutting down training time without impacting your performance. The next thing are what I call super condensed routines. And so this is basically where you take the core workout routines that I outlined earlier and you strip them down to the core essentials. So instead of doing, 5 to 6 exercises in each workout, you do just 3. So you go in there, you hit your compound exercises, and then you get out. And so what that might look like is on Monday, you might do your squats, your weighted chin-ups, your overhead press, and then you call it a day. And then you rest up until, Thursday or Friday. And then on that workout, you get in, you do your deadlifts, your bench press, your rows, and then you call it a day. And believe it or not, this is extremely, extremely effective, because sometimes, especially the way a lot of people use isolation exercises, they can often detract from your performance and your strength gains on the big movements. And so sometimes by taking all of your focus, all your resources, and just dumping that into the compound movements, you can make insanely good progress. This is also a strategy that I use to milk out more progress at the end of my workout routines, but it's incredibly effective if you have a really busy schedule and you're looking to maximize your gym efficiency. And so the next one is that you can train just once a week. So believe it or not, you can build an incredible physique working out just once a week, as long as you pick the best exercises for you, you train them really hard, and you focus on progressively overloading them over time. And so if you're gonna work out just once a week, the workout routine that I would recommend is to do squats, bench presses, weighted chin-ups, and then a couple isolation exercises. And you do that for just 2 sets each. You get in, you train hard, you focus on getting stronger over time, and then you get out, and it's an extremely effective strategy. If you enjoyed this video, then you're gonna love this video right here, where I break down the 5 reasons you're not building muscle.